She met him on a Tuesday, the kind of Tuesday that feels like it doesn't belong to any part of the week. Gray sky, coffee half warm, a promotion that didn't come. And yet there he was, standing by the elevator in that quiet way that people do when they've learned how to carry silence like a charm. His name was Daniel. He smiled like someone who had healed from something, but never talked about what it was. And maybe that's why Sarah fell so quickly. Not because he showed her everything, but because he showed her nothing and let her fill in the rest. It started slowly, like most of the things we regret. Lunches turned into shared playlists. Playlists turned into late-night messages. The kind that start with "can't sleep" and end with "wish you were here." When he finally kissed her, it didn't feel like the beginning of something. It felt like a secret being whispered into her ribs. She hadn't felt that in years. She hadn't felt chosen. Daniel said all the right things. Not too perfect, not rehearsed, just close enough to sound real. He liked his steak medium. He hated olives. He used to have a dog named Lucky. He wanted kids someday, but only with the right person. That made her laugh. It felt like a quiet promise, disguised as casual talk. She let him stay the night the third time they kissed. He brought toothpaste the next time. They never talked about when it became official. It just was. Sarah never imagined she'd fall in love again at 32. Not after James, not after everything she had to clean up. His debt, his silence, the abortion he said wasn't his problem. She told herself she was fine. That being alone was easier. That love was just a delay before disappointment. But Daniel changed that. Or at least he made her want to believe again. And that was enough, for a while. Until the red flag she ignored showed up again. Then another. And another. He never let her touch his phone. He was sweet, but not present. He never invited her to his place, always came to hers. Said he was staying with a cousin while handling some stuff. She asked once, casually, "Do you ever want me to see where you live?" He kissed her neck and said, "Soon." Soon became later. Later became silence. And then came the night she found the receipt. It wasn't hidden. It was tucked into his jacket, which he draped over the kitchen chair after dinner. She was cleaning up, folding it, moving it to the rack by the door. She felt it. The small crinkle of paper. Innocent. Nothing. Until it wasn't. It was from a pharmacy. 3 items. A prenatal vitamin bottle. A box of stretch mark cream. And a thank you printed at the bottom. "Have a healthy pregnancy, Amanda." Sarah stared at it for a full minute before her brain caught up. She read it again. And again. Then she sat down. Not because she was devastated. Not yet. But because her body knew something her heart wasn't ready to believe. Amanda. He'd never mentioned an Amanda. Never mentioned anyone, really. And have a healthy pregnancy wasn't the kind of message that came from fantasy. It was real, tangible, paid for with a debit card. His debit card. She checked the timestamp. 3 days ago. When he came back from the store, casual like nothing had changed, she was sitting at the table with the receipt laid flat in front of her. He looked at it, then at her. And in that second, something changed in his eyes. Not fear, not guilt. Strategy. He didn't say, "I can explain." He didn't ask what she saw. He said, "Where did you get that?" And just like that, the mask slipped. Sarah didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just looked at him with a kind of silence that could snap bone. "You lied," she said, voice barely above a whisper. He opened his mouth, closed it, then sat down slowly, like a man about to negotiate his own sentence. "I didn't want you to find out like this," he said. But he didn't say it like someone ashamed. He said it like someone caught too early. Sarah had always believed, in warnings, that the universe doesn't just strike, it whispers. And that night, All the whispers became one voice. The way he never stayed too long. The way he pulled away when she said, "I love you." The way he smiled when she cried, like he'd seen it all before and was already gone. She stood up, walked past him, and opened the door. "Go," she said. He didn't argue, and that should have been the end. But Amanda was only the beginning. Sarah didn't cry that night, not even after the door closed and she heard his footsteps fading into the hallway. Instead, she cleaned, wiped the counters twice, reorganized the spice drawer, folded laundry that didn't need folding. There was something about movement that felt like survival. Stillness invited thinking, and thinking was dangerous. Not because she didn't know what happened, but because she did. And that kind of clarity has a price. She had been building a future with a ghost, and now all that was left were fingerprints and a receipt. By morning, the numbness wore off. What came next wasn't rage. It was hunger. For truth. She hadn't just been lied to. She had been constructed. Fabricated into someone safe enough to lie to. That made her feel stupid in a way she hadn't in years, and that version of her, the one who once begged someone not to leave, wasn't coming back. She opened her laptop, started searching, not for Daniel. She already knew what little he let her know was curated. She searched for Amanda, the name printed at the bottom of the receipt, a pharmacy in her own city. Narrow it down, sort by neighborhood, socials, photos. Then she found her Amanda Reeves. Private account, a profile picture of a smiling woman in scrubs with her hand on her belly. 5 months along, according to the comment thread. Sarah stared at the photo. 5 months, she counted backwards. Daniel had been in her bed 4 months ago. The timeline split her open. She wasn't the other woman. She was one of the women, and that realization burned colder than any betrayal. Amanda had 428 followers. Sarah didn't recognize any of them. But then she clicked mutuals. 3 shared. One stood out. Jenna, an old friend from college who now worked as a nurse. Sarah didn't hesitate. She messaged her. "Hey Jenna, random question. Do you know Amanda Reeves personally?" The reply came fast. "Yeah, she works at St. Francis." "Why?" "Just trying to get in touch." "You two close?" "Not super close, but we were in a support group last year." "Why? Is everything okay?" "Support group?" Sarah felt her stomach knot. "Can I ask you something? Please keep it between us." "Of course." "Do you know who the father of her baby is?" The typing bubble appeared, then disappeared, then returned. She said he wasn't in the picture anymore, but I think his name was Daniel. "Why?" Sarah didn't respond. She couldn't. It wasn't just a coincidence. It wasn't just a mistake. He had lived 2 lives, simultaneously, and now one of them was growing inside another woman. She needed air. She walked for blocks without a direction. The city felt unfamiliar, like the backdrop had shifted and everyone was pretending not to notice. She passed the corner where they used to get bagels on Sunday. The bookstore, he said, reminded him of his childhood. Everything was littered with memory, and she didn't trust a single one of them now. She ended up on a park bench. It was cold, but the kind that made her feel awake. Her phone buzzed. It was Jenna again. "Hey." Not trying to pry, but whatever this is, just know Amanda is a really kind person. And she's been through a lot. Sarah stared at the message. Kind. Through a lot. What about her? What about the fact that she'd almost moved in with a man who might have been stringing her along while planning to raise a child with someone else? Or, worse, planning nothing at all? That evening, her curiosity mutated into something else. Resolve. She wanted to hear it from Amanda. Not to accuse, not to blame. Just to understand who the hell she had been sleeping beside for nearly a year. She typed out a message. "Hi, Amanda. You don't know me. My name is Sarah." I believe we might have something in common. Can we talk? She expected silence. Maybe hostility. But the reply came less than an hour later. Daniel? That one word cut like a scalpel. Yes. The typing. Bubble came back. Then vanished. Then returned. I thought I was done with surprises, but here we are. When and where? They met at a coffee shop the next morning. Amanda was calm, not defensive. She looked like someone who had already lived through the worst part. And Sarah didn't feel like an enemy. She felt like a reflection. Two people caught in the same storm from opposite windows. I'm not here to fight, Sarah said as soon as she sat down. I just need to know who he really is. Amanda nodded. You and me both. And for the next 30 minutes they shared everything. Dates, stories, overlaps, lies disguised as affections. It was like assembling a puzzle neither of them wanted to see completed. The most chilling part? He told Amanda that Sarah was his cousin's ex, someone he was helping through a rough patch. He had called her unstable, said she still clung to him out of nostalgia, and to Sarah he had said Amanda was an old high school friend going through a divorce. Both were partly true. Enough to be believable. Enough to become weapons. By the time they finished their drinks, neither woman spoke. Not because they had nothing left to say, but because the weight of what had been said already filled the room. Amanda reached into her bag and pulled out something that made Sarah stop breathing. A ring. Simple. Silver. A small emerald in the center. He gave this to me a week ago, Amanda said. Said he wanted to marry me after the baby came. Sarah stared at it. It was the same ring he once pointed to in a shop window months ago, when they were walking, past on their way to dinner. He'd said, "That would look beautiful on your hand." She laughed at the time. Now she wanted to scream. Sarah didn't remember walking home. The hours after the coffee shop were a blur, colorless, numb, and strangely quiet, like the city had been wrapped in glass. Her phone buzzed twice in her pocket, but she didn't check it. Her legs moved, on instinct. Her mind wasn't in the present. It was inside a carousel of every memory she now saw differently. Every time he kissed her forehead. Every time he said, "You're the only one who really gets me." Every late-night conversation where he promised that this, them, was real. She had loved him sincerely. She had planned a life in silence, while he played one aloud with someone else. The betrayal wasn't just that he lied. It was that she had built her healing around a person who didn't even exist. That was the part no one prepares you for. Not the heartbreak. The rewriting of every moment you thought was true. She got home and sat on the kitchen floor, still, in her coat. The receipt, that stupid receipt, was still on the table, flattened under a glass. Like a trophy for the version of herself that finally paid attention. She hated that it had taken this long. Hated that she had known deep down something was off. But she wanted love to work so badly that she'd bent reality around it. And now, she was alone again. But this time, she wasn't afraid of it. This time, she was furious. That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking of Amanda's eyes, steady, honest, exhausted. The kind of eyes that had cried in private more times than anyone would guess. And Sarah realized something that made her stomach turn. Amanda was still in it. Still tethered to him. Not because she wanted to be, but because she was carrying a part of him she couldn't walk away from. Sarah couldn't fix that. But maybe she could make sure it ended with them. At 3:41 a.m., she picked up her phone and texted Daniel. I know everything. No punctuation. No greeting. Just truth stripped bare. He didn't respond that night. He called at 7:12 the next morning. She let it ring. Then again at 7:18, then a text. Can we talk, please? She replied, You've done enough talking. And yet, somewhere in her gut, she knew he wouldn't just vanish. Men like Daniel never leave when they lose power. They linger. They offer just enough emotion to keep the door open. Not enough to change, just enough to hope. Later that day, Sarah walked into her building lobby and nearly dropped her keys. Daniel was sitting there, waiting. He stood when he saw her, hands in pockets, hair messy like he hadn't slept. "Sarah," he started, voice low. She raised her hand. "Don't. I need you to hear—" "No," she cut in. "You need me to listen. You don't get that anymore." He looked stunned. She could tell he hadn't expected her to be this clear, this done. "I made mistakes," he said. "But it wasn't just lies. What we had was real," she finished. "You told Amanda the same thing, gave her a ring." His eyes dropped. "And what was I? The dress rehearsal? The backup plan?" Her voice cracked, but her eyes didn't. Took a step forward, but she stepped back. "Please," he said. "I didn't know how to choose." "You did," she said. "You just didn't choose me." He tried the usual tactics, the soft voice, the hurt expression, the vague promises of getting help and making it right. She watched it unfold like a script she had already seen too many times before. And for the first time, she wasn't tempted to forgive. She wasn't wondering if she had overreacted. She wasn't hoping he'd cry, she was simply done. And that, ironically, gave her the kind of power that terrified men like him. She stepped around him and walked straight to the elevator. He called her name, once, twice. She didn't turn. When the doors closed, she let out a breath that tasted like freedom. 2 days later, Amanda called. Not texted, called. Sarah picked up, heart beating faster than expected. "I told him," Amanda said. "Everything. That I knew. That you knew. That I wasn't going to protect his version anymore." Sarah exhaled, slow and long. "How did he take it?" He tried to lie again, but he knew. "I wasn't falling for it anymore." Silence passed between them like a fragile truce. "I've decided to move," Amanda added. "My sister's got a guest room. I need to be somewhere new when the baby comes." Sarah nodded, even though Amanda couldn't see her. "And I wanted to thank you," Amanda said. "Not just for reaching out, for not blaming me, for helping me see it clearly." Sarah swallowed hard. "You did that yourself." "No," Amanda replied softly. "You reminded me I deserved better. That was enough." That night, Sarah stood in front of her bathroom mirror. She stared at her own reflection for a long time, as if seeing herself for the first time without anyone else's gaze involved. She wasn't broken. She wasn't used. She wasn't the aftermath of someone else's recklessness. She was the lesson. The line that doesn't bend anymore. She opened the top drawer of her vanity, pulled out the last thing Daniel ever gave her, a bracelet, cheap but sentimental, with their initials engraved. She held it for a moment, then dropped it in the trash. She didn't need to burn it. She'd already let it go. Sarah started sleeping with the window open again. At first, it was just to let the air circulate, but over time she realized it was more than that. There was something about the sound of wind, distant traffic, and the occasional late-night siren that reminded her. The world was still moving. She had stopped for a while, frozen in someone else's orbit. But now, even in stillness, she felt her own motion return. The days no longer revolved around what she had lost. They started to revolve around what she wanted to reclaim. Her routine, her focus, her voice. She rejoined the yoga class she had quit months earlier. Took herself out to brunch with a book she'd been meaning to finish. She wore red lipstick on a Wednesday just because she liked the way it felt. And each small act, while quiet on the outside, screamed, "I'm still here," from the inside. Her phone, once a source of anxiety, now lay silent most days. No more waiting. No more refreshing messages, hoping to see his name. No more spiraling into screenshots and memories. Daniel had become a chapter she had no desire to reread. But one message did come. From Amanda, just a photo. A hospital room. A tiny, wrinkled newborn swaddled in pale yellow. And underneath, 2 words. "She's here." Sarah stared at the image for a long time. She didn't feel jealous, or bitter, or even hollow. She felt something harder to describe. Something like honor, like witnessing a sunrise from a place you never thought you'd reach. That baby represented chaos, yes, but she also represented truth, the kind that refused to stay buried. She typed back, "She's beautiful. You're strong. Congratulations." She didn't expect a reply. And none came. But that was okay. Some connections are born just to help you through a storm. They don't need to last forever to matter. Still, something about the photo lingered, with her all day. That night, Sarah found herself walking without a destination again. Her steps led her to a street she hadn't been on in months. It took her a second to realize where she was, right outside the jewelry store where Daniel once pointed to the emerald ring in the window, the ring Amanda had shown her in that coffee shop. It wasn't there anymore. The display had changed. The light inside was warm, but something about the emptiness of the window made Sarah feel full. The next day she received a call from her editor. "Hey, strange request," the woman said. "But I've got a short memoir piece coming in from someone who just left a long-term manipulative relationship. They're not a writer, but they asked for help. Would you be open to ghostwriting it?" Sarah paused. "I can recommend someone else," the editor added quickly. "But when I read the draft, I just thought of you." Sarah said yes. Not out of pity. Not out of ego. She said yes because she understood the terrain. The way certain lies dig into the skin and become part of your nervous system. The way healing isn't linear, but circular. You think you're fine until something small brings it all back. And then one day, it doesn't. And that's the win. The woman she wrote for was named Elise. Elise's story wasn't identical to hers, but the ache was familiar. The patterns, the denial, the apology loops. Sarah wrote with the kind of clarity she hadn't known she had. Not clinical, not dramatic, just honest. When Elise read the final version, she cried. "I feel seen," she told Sarah. And that sentence, more than anything Daniel had ever said, stayed with her. 2 weeks later, Sarah was back at the same park where she once sat, feeling like the whole city was collapsing in on her. This time, she brought a notebook. Not her phone, not a screen, just paper and pen. She wrote a letter. Not to Daniel, not even to Amanda, to herself. To the version of Sarah who waited, who believed, who broke quietly and still showed up every day pretending she hadn't. She wrote, "You didn't fail. You just outgrew the illusion. And now, you are the story." Then she folded the letter and placed it inside the book she was reading. A random page. For a future her, or maybe for someone else. She liked the idea of someone opening the book and finding it unexpectedly. Life, after all, was full of unread pages. That night, as she stood brushing her teeth, she glanced at the empty space on the vanity where Daniel's razor once sat. She didn't miss it, but she didn't erase the memory either. She just let it sit there, like a photo in a museum, part of the exhibit, not the centerpiece. She'd learned something in the fallout, something Daniel would probably never understand. That healing doesn't always look like closure. Sometimes it looks like not needing to rewrite the ending. Sometimes it looks like choosing your peace over your pride. Sometimes it looks like walking past the mirror and seeing yourself, not the version someone else shaped you into. Just you. Enough. 2 months later, Sarah was sitting in the back of a small cafe she hadn't been to in years. It was quiet, tucked away from the main street, the kind of place where no one rushed and no one asked questions. The light through the window landed, soft on her notebook, now filled with scraps of thoughts she wasn't writing for anyone but herself. The world hadn't changed, but she had. It wasn't dramatic. No new haircut. No revenge post. No big speech. Just stillness. A kind of peace that came from knowing she no longer had to prove her worth by how much pain she could survive. She had stopped defining her value by who stayed. Now it was measured by what she no longer allowed back in. On the table beside her was a card. Folded in half, unsent. It was for Amanda. Inside, just one sentence. She will grow up strong because you chose to be. Sarah didn't know if she'd ever send it. Maybe it was enough to have written it, to recognize another woman's strength without competition, without bitterness, without needing to be seen. Some connections leave quietly. Others leave a trace. Amanda left both. That same day, walking home, Sarah passed the bookstore where she and Daniel once spent rainy weekends. She paused. Not from pain, not from nostalgia, from clarity. Inside by the window, she saw a couple browsing. The woman laughed at something. The man smiled and pulled her closer. For a brief second, Sarah remembered what that felt like. The illusion. That warm, fragile bubble where everything seems fine and nothing is questioned. She didn't miss it, but she respected how much she had once wanted it. She stepped away, letting them keep their moment. Some dreams aren't meant to be resented, just released. That night, she opened a drawer she hadn't touched since everything fell apart. Inside were old photos, notes, a few receipts she didn't throw away, not out of sentiment, but because part of her needed to remember that red flags don't always scream. Sometimes they whisper, soft enough that you have to be still to hear them. She took one of the receipts, folded it in half, and on the back wrote, "Thank you for the lie. It gave me back the truth." Then she placed it in a box. Not to revisit, to close. Properly. Weeks later, Sarah got an email. Subject, Ellie Graceit, was from Amanda. Inside was a picture of the baby, now round-cheeked and wide-eyed, wrapped in a soft yellow blanket. Below it, a message. She smiled today. First time. Just thought you should know. Sarah closed the laptop and sat in silence. It wasn't her child. It wasn't her battle. But somehow she had helped create space for something new to begin. By ending something that never should have lasted. Sometimes the fallout is where we finally bloom. Sometimes the worst lie is what makes the truth visible. And sometimes healing doesn't look like starting over. It looks like finally starting from you. If this story echoed something inside you, comment below. I choose peace. Sometimes it starts with one sentence. Sometimes that's all it takes. And if you know someone who needs this story, send it to them. Maybe they've been waiting for a truth they haven't heard yet. Subscribe for the next confession.